All right, so let's just jump into Xcode now that we have a little bit of an introduction to the actual class. Xcode is the main program you're going to be using throughout the whole class. We'll touch a couple other programs later, but for now, basically, we're just going to be in here, and we're going to leap into a project head first. And we're going to make our first app together. I'm going to walk you through it. I'm going to pause and explain a few things along the way, but mostly we're just going to be kind of building together. And what I really want you to do is explore the software and figure out, exactly what's going on in here. It's a little complex. There's a lot of buttons. There's a lot of things to click. There's a lot of things in this sort of object library that we'll talk about in just a minute. So make sure you explore it, and you can break things and quit and restart it and try it over and over again. But just really play with the software, and then we're going to go into deep detail after this into each of the things that we do, including the code, the design, and all that kind of stuff. So let's just start by creating a new Xcode project. I'm going to click that button. Whenever I hit create, it's going to open up this template. And this template screen has a bunch of different options. By the way, I have a student, Hannah, who's going to be working with us alongside us, and so I may be occasionally flipping to her screen. Her screen's in dark mode, mine's in light. That's how you'll be able to tell the difference. So we have a bunch of different templates that appear. We're going to go with single view app. That just means basically a blank application. So go ahead and click next after you select single view app. And on this screen, we're going to give our product name. That's the name of our app. So I'm going to call this, let's call it Introduction App. Now, you may not have this team right here. It may say add account or something like that. You may have to sign in. You can just ignore that safely if it says add account. Below that, put your full name. And then below that, your org identifier is going to be probably org and then dot and then your full name. Some people use com, dot their full name. It just depends, and we'll go into more detail about what that means later. Make sure the language is on Swift and not Objective-C. And then this is the most important thing. Make sure it's on Storyboard and not Swift UI. Swift UI is a relatively new way of making applications. We're going to stick with Storyboard for this class. Go ahead and click Next. You don't need any of those other boxes checked. And we're just going to hit Create. We'll pick the folder and hit Create. And it may take a bit, but it's going to build the project. And you're going to be sort of probably a little overwhelmed with the amount of information that it gives you, but very simply, the left-hand side of the screen, this left column over here, is your file navigator. So if you click different things in there, you're jumping between different files. So if I click appdelegate.swift or viewcontroller.swift, I'm jumping between different Swift files, which are pieces of code. And we're going to end up clicking main.storyboard, and we'll pause on that. And whenever you click main.storyboard, you're actually going to see what looks like a phone, and in fact, it is a phone. This is what's called a storyboard editor. And in the middle of our screen, we're actually going to be able to edit this phone, and this is the application that we're building. So this is the screen, and you can see it simulates it. This is like an iPhone 11. And we'll talk about how to change devices and things like that later. Within this storyboard scene, you can notice on the left-hand side, there's something that says View Controller Scene, and a little arrow. And if you click that arrow, it'll twirl down. And there's another arrow that says View Controller, and you can click that and twirl down even further. And you can keep twirling and see all the different things that are in the view. So View is basically our entire application. Whenever we start adding objects to this, you're going to see that list start to grow. This will start to have more and more objects in it. So this is our scene navigator. This is our storyboard editor. And then on the right-hand side, we have the inspector. And the inspector is sort of how we get to the nitty-gritty details of what we have selected. So whenever I select something, so for instance, just click the white area on your phone. On the right-hand side, you'll see there's an option that says background. Okay? And background, whenever I click it, it shows me a bunch of different colors, including an option that says custom, which I'll just click to the very bottom. And within this custom color selector, there's different types of selections. We can pick different colors, and you can see it'll update. Go ahead and pick a color that you like. You can close out of that color window. So you can see how this sort of is a scoping from left to right. So left on our screen, the furthest left, this project navigator, where we had all of our different files, this is like the topmost sort of overview. Then we go into the actual scene or the item we have selected over here. And then the things we select in here end up over here in the right-hand side. So it goes from big on the far left, and then we select something, and it appears in the middle, and then the things we select in the middle appear on the right. So you can kind of see how that little stair-stepping happens. Let's go ahead and add an object to this scene. This is a pretty cool app right now, but it doesn't have anything actually in it. So in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, we're going to have a little plus button. And that plus button says library whenever I hold my mouse over it. And if I click, it's going to open up this thing that's kind of like Spotlight on your Mac. And we're going to see if I scroll through this list, there's all these different objects that I could put into my scene. Let's start by putting a button into the scene. And I could type in the word button to get that to appear if I wanted to, or I could scroll and find it. And we're just going to simply drag and drop that into the scene. So I clicked and dragged, and I dropped it into the scene, and the button's there. Notice if you click the button on the right-hand side, it gives you all these different options, things like font, text color. If you picked a background color that's close to your button color, you may want to change that. And there's loads of other things that we can play with. Let's also go ahead and hit that plus again in the upper right-hand corner. So that's the object library. I'm just repeating that so you remember. And let's add something called a label. And a label, and if we read the little definition here, it's just a piece of text. It's basically a piece of text that isn't editable by the user. So this is like something like a title, or maybe a little note or something that they need to read that they can't edit. Let's go ahead and drag and drop that into the scene just right above my button. And as you're dragging and dropping that in, you may notice that it's going to kind of snap around, because there's these smart guides that sort of snap it to the middle or to the sides to help you keep everything nice and aligned. Let's go back up to that plus one more time, and let's add a text field. That's 2 words. So a text field, again, if we read this, is something that contains editable text. This might be like a form or something that you put your email into, or your password or your username. Let's go ahead and drag and drop that below the button. So I have my text fields, my button, and my label, all 3 things in my scene. So what's great about these is each one of these, whenever I click them, so if I click label, on the right-hand side in that inspector view, I'm going to be able to see all the different attributes that I could edit. Things like the font, like the color, the background, things like that. I want you to really explore this and play around with these settings and see what you can do to it. You can make it bigger or smaller, change what it looks like, change the font, things like that. Same with the text field. If I click on the text field, I have the same thing. I have lots and lots of options. They're a little bit different than the others. So they might have things like what kind of keyboard can be used here. Stuff like decimal pads or number pads, or your full text keyboard. Notice objects in the scene have little anchors on the left and right that you can pull to make things bigger or smaller. So if you want to make your button bigger or your text field bigger, you can do that. So we've got this all set up. And you're probably asking, how do I save this? Well, actually, this is basically saving constantly. That's a tricky thing with Xcode. It's saving pretty much all the time. But one of the ways we can force it to save is to do Command B, as in build. If I do Command B, it'll quote-unquote build the app, and it'll say build succeeded. And that means it's saved and everything's good to go. Okay? Any questions so far?
No.
Cool. So in the upper left-hand corner, let's actually run our app. And this might take a little bit of time if you've never done it before. So you'll see that there's the name of our app, Introduction App. And then next to that, we have something that might say iPhone SE. Let's click that, and we can see there's a bunch of different options, iPhone 11, iPhone 11 Pro. So I might just stick with this iPhone SE, but I want to make sure that my view here matches what I'm going to see in my iPhone SE. So the bottom of this view where it says iPhone 11 down here, we can go ahead and click that and change that to, one of these is an iPhone SE. I'm not sure which one. I have to kind of mouse over. Okay, there we go. It's this third one from the right. Oh, yours might be a little bit different too, depending on the screen you're on. So that iPhone SE, okay, so it does look a little different because that screen is smaller than the iPhone 11. So I'm just going to kind of move my stuff around again. I'm just going to give myself some space at the bottom of the screen. Okay. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, we're going to go into a lot of detail over every single step that we just did, but I'm just kind of moving you through it so you can sort of see where eventually you'll end up and what you'll be able to do with this software. This at the bottom, which again, it might be like an actual little selector that you have that just lists them. These are all the different devices that we could be building for. So we could be building for tablets and stuff like that. Okay, let's go ahead and hit that play button in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, and that is the build and run in simulator. And again, this may take a bit the first time, so let's go ahead and click that. And what's going to happen is it's actually going to create a fake iPhone on our computer. If I click this, I can see it. And yours may look a little bit different. I have mine set up in a specific way for my taste. But yours may actually have the home button, it may have like a power button, things like that. And again, if it's your first time running it, it's probably going to take a minute. It has to really configure the entire thing. And this is a fully functional iPhone that it's building on your computer. Something else I'd recommend if you're using like a MacBook or anything battery powered, I would be really careful and make sure you have it plugged in whenever you start running this, because essentially you're battery powering a full iPhone as well as your MacBook simultaneously. So mine's loaded. I'm going to show you mine while yours is still building. And this is really like a full iPhone. I can click, and as I click around, you can see the button reads that as me tapping. If I click in my form, my text fields, the keyboard, it's going to say continue. The little keyboard will appear at the bottom of the screen. If you don't see the keyboard, you can do Command K. And we can either type using our computer or type using the keyboard. And it's going to make the little clicky sounds. And if you don't own an iPhone, this is kind of a fun way to play around with one. So we can put text in here. We can hit the button and notice the button flashes. We can't hit the label because remember, labels aren't interactive. And you may have done just what Hannah just did, which was she hit the home button, which is totally fine. And you'll see that this is in fact a full iPhone. If I hit the home button up here, here's our app, introduction app, and there's the default apps that come with an iPhone. I can tap it to get back in. I can click this little rotate button to rotate it sideways. It's pretty cool.
My keyboard disappeared.
Command K will hide your keyboard. There you go. Also, you probably just noticed whenever you held Command, or I think you were holding Option, Option brings up 2 touches. So this is how you would do pinch gestures in the future whenever we're zooming in and out or testing pinch, like multi-touch gestures. There you go. You can take screenshots with the screenshot button. Again, yours may look a little bit different than mine, which is fine. So whenever we're done, let's make some edits in Xcode. I'm going to click back in Xcode. And back in Xcode, I'm going to want to hit this stop button. And the stop button is going to stop it from running in Simulator. If I open up Simulator, I can see it stopped running. But keep in mind, Simulator is still running in the background. Now, this isn't a big deal if you're plugged into power, but again, if you're on battery, you probably want to quit completely out of Simulator. So go ahead and click in Simulator, and you click Simulator at the top of the screen and hit quit, or you can just do Command Q and that'll quit out. I'm going to jump back into my iPhone. So we've got this little setup here. Let's connect it to some code, which is really the really cool part of Xcode with how all of that works. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of reduce how much stuff is on my screen because there's a lot on my screen. In the upper right-hand corner, you probably noticed these 3 buttons, which were next to our little plus button. And these show and hide different parts of the user interface. I'm going to go ahead and hide everything except for the far left Project Navigator. So in that Project Navigator, we can quickly open up another file. So right now we're in our main storyboard file. We can open up one of these other files by simply holding Option and then clicking the viewcontroller.swift. Okay, so that's what we're going to click. But if you click any of these, it's going to open up a second screen. So I hold Option and I click ViewController.Swift, and look at that. It pops the code right next to my scene. A view controller is just a fancy name for what you see on your phone. This is a view controller. That's what we've been editing the entire time. And on the right-hand side of the screen, I have my code. And this is the code that's tied to this scene. So right now, there's no code in here, right? Or there's no code that we've written. So right now, whenever we hit the button, nothing happens. Whenever we type on the keyboard, nothing happens, right? We're just kind of doing stuff. Let's tie it together. So what we're going to do, again, and a lot of this code stuff I'm going to explain later, but I just want you to hop in. I'm going to click on line 18 to start, and you can see there's little numbers here on the left-hand side. I'm going to hit return a few times, just going to give myself some space. So now I have some space, and I should have a little final curly brace on line 33 or somewhere around there. I'm going to go back to line 18, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect some things to my code, okay? I'm going to connect my label to my code first. Remember, a label is just a piece of text. So let's click on our label in our scene, and what we're going to do, and this might be a little tricky, is we're going to right-click and drag, or if you feel more comfortable holding Control, you can hold Control, click, and drag. Go ahead and watch me do it first. And it's going to give me this little arm. So I'm just clicking and dragging and holding Control. And what it's going to do is whenever I release it into my code, so on that line 18, it's going to pull up a little menu. And what that's asking me is, do I want to connect to the code, and how should I connect to it? This is going to connect as what's called an outlet, which basically means we're accessing some data from this thing. Because what we're going to do is we're going to write some code where we're going to write our name in the text form, in the text field. We're going to hit the button, and it's going to say hi, and then our name above in the label. So let's call this my label. We want to do that all as one word. You can capitalize it however you like, but you're going to see me doing this camel case style because that's the way I like to write it. But let's do that all as one word, no spaces, and hit connect. And what's going to happen, this is some magic, it's going to write the code for us. So it just wrote this little code for us, and we don't need to understand all of it right now, but it's going to make sense very shortly in just a few videos. It connected a little thing called an IB outlet, and it's a variable called myLabel. So we can access that data by naming it. We named it myLabel, and we're gonna edit that name. We're gonna edit myLabel later. So the next thing we're gonna connect is our text field. I'm gonna select my text field. I'm going to do it from over here this time, from the sort of navigator view, round style text field. And you'll see it's the exact same as if I was selecting it in here, in the main scene view. I'm going to Control, click and drag, and drop that in. And it's going to give me a couple options. I'm going to change that connection to outlet, so we don't want it on action. Just like our label, we're going to do an outlet, and I'm going to call this my text field. Okay, great. So we got my text field, we got my label, and as long as they're above this curly brace down here, we're safe. You may be getting some errors if you connected it below, or if you try to connect it into another place. For now, it's okay as long as it's above that little curly brace at the end. All right, the last thing we're going to connect is our button, and the button is going to connect just a little bit differently. I'm going to select my button, do the same thing, either Control, click and drag, or right click and drag. And I'm going to release just below those. This one we are going to connect as an action. And an action just means it's something that occurs whenever the user interacts with it. So this action is going to happen when we tap it. So when we tap the button, this is the thing that's going to happen. I'm going to call it button tapped, just because that's what I like to call things. I like to give them actual verb names. And I'm going to hit connect. And what you're going to see is it's going to look a little bit different than the lines above. Hannah, what do you notice with that line we just did? How does it? What's really different about it?
This one has parentheses.
It's got parentheses right here. Those are called arguments, which we'll be learning about later. What do you see after the parentheses?
It added a new curly bracket.
Yeah, so it added this little curly brace or curly bracket. It's the same thing. It's all good. This little curly guy right here. And it added another one on the line below it. You can kind of think of these as like little hands, and one of them is the left hand, one of them is the right hand, and they hold all the code between them. So if I click right here at the end of my line and I hit return a few times to give myself some lines, anything I put right here, that's what's going to be executed every time we tap. So every time we tap on that button, this code, whatever code is right here, that's what's going to run. And it's going to run over and over and over again. So, but we have to stick it between these two curly braces, okay? So I'm on line 25 on mine. Might be a different line on yours, but I'm basically the first line after the start of my curly brace for my button. And I'm going to write this, and I'm going to really pay attention to my names up here, including the capitalization and the spelling and everything. So I'm going to write my text field. I'm sorry, let me correct that. I'm going to write my label. You're going to notice as you're typing, it's autofilling a bunch of stuff. You can use the arrow keys to navigate through those and hit return to select one. So I'm just going to select my label, and then I'm going to type in dot. And whenever I hit dot, a bunch of things are going to appear. I can scroll through those. These are all of the properties of my label. You're never going to have to memorize this stuff. It might be a little daunting at first. We're just going to type in the word text and hit return. And then we're going to put a space. And we're going to do equals my text field. So same as the my label. My text field dot text. So what we're doing is we're saying the text in my label, or let's take this from reverse actually. The text in my text field, when I hit the button, is going to be sent to my label. Okay? That makes sense so far?
Yes.
Cool. Let's go ahead and build it. So just Command B to build, make sure everything's good. You might get an error. If you get an error, then we'll fix it. But for now, I think everything's succeeded. Let's go ahead and run our program. We'll hit run. So we have label, a button. Let's click in here and let's add some text. I'm just going to add my name, and I'll click the button. So it works, but what do we notice?
My name doesn't fit.
Yep, mine neither. So what we need to do is we need to make our label bigger. So let's click on our label in our scene view and just drag out these little white boxes and just make that quite a bit longer. I'm going to type in my name.
What if I'm already running it?
You can go ahead and hit stop and it'll run it again. Yep, and you're fine. Basically, it just has to stop the one that's currently running and run a new one. All right, that works better. So in this case, it's basically like that button is basically our enter button. In fact, why don't we edit that button? Let's zoom in a little bit on our scene view and just go ahead and click on the text button. And let's just put like enter or something like that. Might be a little bit easier to remember. So it's saying our name right now, which is great. But let's have it do one more thing. Let's have it say a little message to us. Okay? Let's have it say, hi, my name is, and then output that name. I'm going to just delete what I have in here. Well, actually, we can just delete this part that says my text field.text. So it says my label.text equals, and what we're going to do is we're going to put some quotes, so little quotation marks, and we're going to write, hello, my name is, and now we need to fill that in with the, I'm going to put a little space after my name is, by the way. So hello, my name is space, and then ending quote. While we're doing this, I'm going to go ahead and make my font bigger. If I go Xcode Preferences, which you may want to do this too, you can pick your font size under Fonts and Colors. I'm going to do Presentation Light. This is a little bit easier to see. It's in the Fonts and Colors tab, and you can.
I'm actually happy with the size of
Okay,
I just
cool.
wanted to find it.
So I have my hello, my name is, and then a space, and then the quote, and let's do a space, and then plus space, and we'll say my text field dot text. It might give us a little error here. It's going to be like our first error that we get. If I click that little red guy, it's going to tell me what the problem is. And in fact, it's going to give me some solutions too, which is another really cool part of Xcode. For now, I'm not going to explain what this is. It's kind of a complicated thing, but it has to deal with whether or not there's any text in here. Basically, Xcode is concerned that, like, well, what happens if there's no text in here and somebody hits enter? It's going to break. So we have to kind of tell it, nah, don't worry about it. We'll put text in there. So let's hit the one that says force unwrap using exclamation point to abort execution if the optional value contains nil. And we'll just hit fix, and that will actually fix the code for us. And now it works. It's another really cool function. Let's go ahead and run it. Let's type in our name, and let's hit that button. Boom. So let's edit. Let's change our name to something else. We can put whatever we want in here, and every time we hit enter, it's going to change. Magic. All right. Very cool. So we're going to stop here, and we're going to kind of review what we've learned so far and go in a little bit more depth about what exactly all these things mean.